My wife left when our daughter was just 10 months old. I took my daughter back to my parents' house, thinking they would at least provide us shelter. But just a few months later, they ruthlessly kicked us out onto the streets, penniless, homeless. We wandered under a bridge, becoming vagrants. I thought my life had hit rock bottom until that night. In the biting cold wind, an old man in an expensive suit appeared before me and said, "I am your grandfather." I froze, stunned, because my whole life I had believed he was long dead, and what happened next changed everything. I am James Carter, 35 years old, a factory worker living in a small industrial town in Michigan. My life was never easy, but I never imagined it would collapse so quickly. Just a few months ago, I had a home, however modest, however hard-earned. I had Sarah, the woman I loved, and Emily, our little daughter, who was my entire world. But now, all of that is just a memory, fading like smoke in the wind. Every morning, I woke up at 4:30 before the dawn could even break through the gray rooftops of the town. I dragged myself out of bed, my shoulders aching from the previous day's work at the auto factory. The roar of machinery, the acrid smell of burning metal, the sweat rolling down my forehead. That was my life day in and day out. But I didn't complain. I worked for Sarah and Emily, for my daughter's smile when I held her in my arms, for the gentle look in Sarah's eyes when she still loved me. Our home was a small apartment with stained walls and worn-out furniture. My factory wages were enough to cover the rent, buy milk for Emily, and keep the fire burning in our home. Sarah used to work as an office clerk, but after Emily was born, she quit to stay home and care for her. I didn't mind, even though the financial burden weighed heavily on my shoulders. I thought that's what a man does, provide for his family, no matter how tough it gets. "Are you okay, James?" Sarah asked me one evening as I slumped into a chair, my hands still grimy with the smell of machine oil. She stood in the corner of the kitchen, the dim yellow light casting a glow on her brown hair. I smiled and nodded. "I'm fine. As long as you and Emily are happy, I can handle anything." But I didn't notice, or maybe I chose not to notice, that the look in Sarah's eyes had changed. She no longer looked at me the way she used to. Her smiles became forced, and our conversations grew shorter. Some nights when I came home late from a shift, I found her sitting alone in the living room, eyes glued to her phone, her fingers scrolling quickly as if hiding something. "Who's that?" I'd ask, trying to keep my tone light. "Just an old friend," she'd reply quickly. Turning off the screen, I told myself I was imagining things. Sarah was my wife, the mother of my child. She wouldn't do anything to hurt our family. But deep down, I felt a growing distance between us, like a small crack in a wall, spreading wider each day, and I didn't know how to fix it. Emily was my only light. At 10 months old, with her chubby cheeks and big round eyes, she always looked at me as if I were her entire universe. Every time I held her, my exhaustion melted away. "You're my treasure. You know that," I'd whisper as she grabbed my finger and giggled. Those moments made me forget the piling bills, the late-night overtime shifts, and the times Sarah avoided my gaze. But then the doubts started gnawing at me. One evening when I came home earlier than usual, I caught Sarah hurriedly shoving her phone into her pocket. She flinched when she saw me, and for a brief moment, I saw panic in her eyes. "Why are you so nervous?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's nothing," she said, but her voice trembled as if she were hiding a secret. I didn't want to believe my instincts, but they grew stronger, like a storm brewing on the horizon. And that storm, it hit faster than I could have imagined, sweeping away everything I once called family. It was a Saturday when I took a day off to stay home with Emily. Sarah said she needed to go out to meet a friend. "Just grabbing coffee. Don't worry," she said. But her eyes didn't meet mine. I nodded, holding Emily in my arms, watching Sarah leave with her purse swinging on her shoulder. Something about the way she walked made my heart tighten, but I didn't dare dwell on it. That night, Sarah came home late. I was sitting on the sofa, Emily fast asleep in her crib. When she walked in, I caught a whiff of unfamiliar perfume, not the one she usually wore. "Where were you all day?" I asked, trying to keep my tone gentle, but she just shook her head, muttering something about meeting an old colleague. I wanted to believe her, but my heart was screaming otherwise. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. While Sarah was in the shower, I checked her phone. A few minutes scrolling through her messages shattered my world. The words on the screen cut into my heart like knives. "I miss you." Read a message from an unsaved number. "Meet again tonight. I'll tell James I'm seeing a friend." And then dozens more messages. Sweet. Intimate. From a man I didn't know. But I knew enough to understand that Sarah had betrayed me. I stood there, hands trembling, the phone slipping from my grasp and hitting the floor. When Sarah stepped out of the bathroom, she looked at me, then at the phone on the ground. Her face went pale. James, you," she stammered, but I didn't let her finish. "Who is he?" "Sarah." My voice was hoarse, not from anger, but from pain. "Who is he that you could do this to me?" To Emily, she looked up, her eyes shimmering with an emotion I couldn't decipher. "Was it regret or resolve, James?" she said, her voice chillingly calm. "We need to talk." And then she told me. No long explanations. No beating around the bush. She said she'd reconnected with an old colleague from work, a guy named David I'd only heard mentioned in passing. "We were just talking at first," she said, but her voice faltered as she spoke of later meetings, coffee dates that stretched into evenings, messages that turned into declarations of love. "He makes me feel alive. James, I'm sorry, but I can't keep living like this." I stood there frozen, as if the blood in my veins had stopped flowing. "Living like this, how?" "Sarah," I asked, my voice trembling. "Living with me, with Emily, with our family. What is it you can't stand?" She didn't answer right away. She turned her face away, her shoulders trembling slightly. "I'm not happy," she finally said, her voice flat like she was reading a script. "I tried, but I can't. I want a divorce." The word divorce hit me like a sledgehammer. I wanted to scream, to ask her why, to beg her to reconsider for Emily, for the years we'd spent together, but I just stood there motionless, watching the woman I loved become a stranger. "What about Emily?" I asked, my voice choking. "She's only 10 months old. Sarah, what are you going to do about her?" She was silent, and that silence hurt more than any words could. "I can't take care of her," she said after a pause, her voice cold as ice. "You keep her, James. I need a new life." I don't remember what I said after that. Maybe I didn't say anything at all. All I know is that when Sarah walked out of the apartment, pulling a small suitcase behind her, it felt like the world collapsed beneath my feet. She didn't look back, not once at Emily. The door slammed shut, and I stood there alone with my baby girl and a broken heart. The days that followed passed in a fog. I still went to work, stood by the production line at the auto factory, but my mind was adrift. The roar of the machines couldn't drown out the questions swirling in my head. Why did she do this? What did I do wrong? How am I going to raise Emily alone? Sarah didn't take long to act on her words. A week later, I received a court summons. She had filed for divorce, and I didn't have the strength to fight it. The court in our small town wasn't complicated, but it wasn't forgiving either. They divided our assets, a fancy term for the tiny apartment Sarah and I had slaved to pay off over the years, and the meager savings I'd scraped together for Emily. That apartment, though run down, was everything I'd been proud of, a home I'd built with sweat and late-night shifts at the factory. The court ordered it sold to split the money, as I couldn't afford to buy out Sarah's share. Everything happened dizzyingly fast. Appraisers came. Then the for sale sign went up. I stood watching the apartment where Emily was born, where I thought we'd have a forever home, sold off for a pittance. On the day they came to clear out the furniture, I stood in the corner of the room holding Emily in my arms. She babbled, her tiny hands clutching my shirt, as if she could sense her father's pain. I watched as the last of our belongings were taken away. The sofa where I'd sat holding Emily, the kitchen table where Sarah used to cook simple dinners, the bed where we'd once lain together dreaming of the future. All of it now just memories. I got half the money from the sale, but it was barely anything after paying off the bank. Sarah took her share and vanished. I heard rumors she'd moved to Chicago with David. She didn't call, didn't ask about Emily. She left our daughter behind, left me as if we'd never existed in her life. I tried to stay strong for Emily. She was the only reason I didn't fall apart. Every morning, I looked into her clear, innocent eyes and told myself I had to be strong. But the truth was, I was breaking. I hadn't just lost my wife, my home. I'd lost faith in what I thought would last forever. I had no choice but to turn to my parents for help. I called my father, Robert. "Dad, I need help," I said, my voice breaking with shame and desperation. Sarah left. "It's just me and Emily now. I don't know what to do." There was a long silence. So long I thought he'd refuse. But then he spoke, his voice dry and curt. "Come back here. Stay with us for now. But you'll need to contribute to living expenses. We're not exactly flush with money." I let out a breath. Though my heart still felt heavy, I thought at the very least family would be a place where Emily and I could find refuge. I packed the few belongings we had left, a bag of my clothes, a few outfits for Emily, and an old stuffed bear she loved to clutch when she slept. I held her close, stepped out of the now empty apartment, and caught a bus to my parents' house. As I boarded the last bus out of town with Emily in my arms, I felt like a failure. The apartment, where I'd thought we'd have a forever home, was now someone else's. The money from its sale was nearly gone. I held my daughter tighter and whispered, "I'll figure it out. Emily, I promise." But deep down, I didn't know how I'd keep that promise. My parents' house sat on the edge of town, a weathered two-story home with faded shingles and a front yard overrun with weeds. I stood at the door, holding Emily, my heart pounding like a beggar's. I didn't want to come back here. Didn't want to face my parents' judgmental stares. But I had no other choice. I knocked, and when my mother Patricia opened the door, she looked me up and down and sighed. "Come in, James," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. "But don't make noise. Your father's resting." I carried Emily up to my old room. It was still there. but not as I remembered it. A thin layer of dust coated the floor. The bed was covered with an old sheet, and the corner was stuffed with random cardboard boxes my parents had shoved in. "This room hasn't been used in a while. Clean it yourself," my mother said, her tone flat, as if it were no big deal. I swallowed hard, looking around the room that once held my childhood dreams, now cold, dusty, and forgotten. The house had only 3 bedrooms. My parents' was the largest at the end of the hall. Michael's, my younger brother's, was tidy with a fresh mattress and his personal belongings untouched because he and his wife visited often. And then there was my room, now little more than a storage closet. The favoritism stabbed at my heart from the very first moment, but I stayed silent. I just needed a place for Emily, even if this childhood room had faded with time. I cleaned the room, spread out a new blanket I'd bought with the little money I had left, set up Emily's crib next to the bed, and tried to turn this place into a makeshift home. "This used to be our room," I whispered to her, holding her close. She babbled, grabbing my finger, and I turned away to hide my tears, to hide my sense of failure. As for my family, my father, Robert, was a harsh man, a former railroad worker, now retired. He spoke little, but every word cut like a knife. "You need to pay for expenses. James," he said on my first day as I was unpacking in the room. "We can't afford to feed 2 extra mouths, and keep it quiet. Don't let Emily's crying disturb us." I nodded, not daring to argue. I knew my parents had their own struggles. Dad's pension was modest, and Mom worked part-time at a grocery store. But the fact that they preserved Michael's room like a museum while mine was left to gather dust made their favoritism painfully clear. Michael, my younger brother, had always been the golden child. Smarter, sent to college with my parents' support, while I had to start working early to fend for myself. Now, when I needed help the most, they still prioritized him, as if I wasn't worth as much. I went back to the auto factory, working like a machine, taking on night shifts to make ends meet. Each day I left the house before dawn, leaving Emily with a kind neighbor who watched her for a small fee. I worked amid the roar of machinery, sweat soaking my shirt, but my mind was always with Emily. I feared she'd go hungry, get sick, or that I wouldn't be able to provide for her. My wages, after paying for childcare and giving my parents a share for expenses, left me with almost nothing. But I gritted my teeth and pushed through for Emily, for the hope that one day I'd get us out of this house where love seemed reserved only for the successful. But my parents didn't make things any easier. My mother constantly reminded me of my failures. "Look at Michael," she said one evening as I came home after a 14-hour shift, my hands still black with machine oil. "He has a career, a proper family. Why can't you be like him?" "James," I bowed my head, silent. Michael was their pride and joy. He worked for an insurance company in Detroit, had a beautiful wife named Jessica and a nice house. To my parents, Michael was the picture of success, while I was just a failed factory worker dragging along a young child, even though I was in my own childhood room. I didn't envy Michael. He was my brother, and I was glad he had a good life. But every time my mother compared us, it felt like another stab to the heart. I wanted to scream that I was trying my best, that I didn't choose to be abandoned by my wife, to lose my home, to come back here like a loser with my daughter in tow. But I stayed quiet, holding Emily close and whispering, "I'll make it, kid." My childhood room, with its faded memories on the walls, became the place where I silently swallowed my pain, where I held my daughter each night and prayed for a way out. Things got worse when Jessica, Michael's wife, gave birth to twins. The two babies, a boy and a girl, arrived like a whirlwind, drawing all my parents' attention. Suddenly, the house was filled with laughter and chatter. My parents bought toys, diapers, and cute clothes for Michael's kids. Every weekend, Michael and Jessica brought the twins over, and the house buzzed like a happy family, except for me and Emily. Michael's room became the headquarters for the grandkids, filled with new toys and echoing with laughter. While my room, my childhood room, was treated like a temporary burden. The favoritism hit me hard. My mother would hold Michael's twins, beaming with joy, whispering sweet words, while Emily, her own granddaughter, got only a passing glance or a scolding when she cried. "Emily's growing fast, but she's too noisy," my mother said coldly one night when Emily was fussy from teething. "You need to teach her to behave. James, we need rest to take care of Michael's kids." I wanted to say that Emily was her granddaughter, too, that she needed love just like the other kids. But I knew it was pointless. My father was more direct. One evening as I came home from work, he called me into the living room. "James," he said, his voice stern, "you've been here long enough. We can't keep supporting you and Emily forever. Michael needs us more. He's got two kids, big responsibilities, and when they visit, we need space for them to be comfortable. You need to figure things out." I stood there stunned, as if I'd been slapped. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I'm doing my best. I work all day. I pay for expenses. I just need a little more time for Emily. I'm begging you for her sake." But he just shook his head. "You're a grown man. James, a man stands on his own 2 feet. We can't carry any more burdens, especially when Michael and his kids need us." The word burden pierced my heart like a dagger. To my parents, Emily and I weren't family. We were a burden. They were willing to keep a room ready for Michael's visits. But me, their eldest son in my own childhood room, was being pushed out onto the street. The tension in the house grew thicker. Every cry from Emily, every time I accidentally spilled something in the room, became an excuse for my mother to complain. "That kid's too loud. James," she'd say, "you need to find somewhere else to stay. Michael and Jessica are coming with the kids soon, and we need to prepare the house for them." I tried to explain that I was saving money, that I just needed more time, but she wouldn't listen. "Michael never caused this kind of trouble," she'd say, and I knew in her eyes I'd never measure up to my brother. The fateful day came abruptly. One morning as I was getting ready for work, my father called me in. He stood at the door of my childhood room now filled with painful memories, his eyes cold. "James," he said, "you need to move out. We need this room to fix up for Michael's kids when they visit. You have 1 week." I stood there holding Emily, feeling the ground collapse beneath me. 1 week, I repeated, my voice trembling. "Dad, where am I supposed to go? How are Emily and I supposed to live?" "That's your problem," he replied, then turned away without a single glance back. My mother stood in the corner, silent, but her eyes said it all. She agreed with him, and I, her eldest son, no longer had a place in this house. I went back to the room, sat on the bed, and held Emily close. She babbled, clutching my shirt as if sensing her father's pain. I looked around my childhood room, its walls once witnesses to my dreams, now just a place of temporary humiliation. I'd lost everything: my wife, my home, and now my own family. I didn't know where I'd go or what I'd do, but I knew one thing: I had to protect Emily no matter the cost. The 1 week passed like a nightmare. I spent every spare moment searching for a new place to live, scouring local newspapers and asking old factory friends for leads. The money left from selling the house wasn't much, but it was enough to rent a cheap, run-down apartment on the outskirts of town. A dilapidated building with stained walls and a musty smell not unlike the basement of my parents' house. The landlord, a gaunt old man named George, eyed me and Emily suspiciously. "No noise and pay on time," he said, his voice raspy from smoking. I nodded, signing the lease with trembling hands, and moved in with our few belongings: a foldable bed from my parents' house, Emily's crib, and a small gas stove I bought at a second-hand market. The apartment was a single room with a shared bathroom in the hallway, but at least it was ours for now. I thought I could make it work. My factory wages were steady, though tight. I'd work harder, save every penny for rent, Emily's milk, and simple food like cold-cut sandwiches. "We'll be okay, kid," I whispered to Emily each night as she slept soundly in her crib. But reality was harsher than I'd imagined. Living costs here were higher than expected. Utilities, gas, and small expenses like diapers for Emily. My savings dwindled like water slipping through my fingers. I cut back on everything, ate less, turned off the lights early, but it still wasn't enough. By the end of each month, I stared at piling bills, my heart tightening with worry. The biggest problem was Emily. She was almost a year old now, active and needing constant care, back at my parents' house. I could leave her with a kind neighbor for a small fee. In this new place, I didn't know anyone I could trust. The nearest daycare charged double my weekly wage. "Not enough money," I muttered, staring at a flyer taped to a lamppost. I couldn't leave her alone. She was too small, too fragile. So, I made a desperate choice. I'd bring Emily to work with me. It was a last resort, but I had no other option. That morning, I carried her to the auto factory, tucked in an old backpack. The roar of machinery and the acrid smell of burning metal were no place for a child. I hid Emily in a corner of the break room, inside a cardboard box lined with a blanket, hoping she'd stay quiet. "Daddy's going to work. Be good." "Okay," I whispered, my heart pounding with fear of getting caught. My coworkers gave me odd looks but said nothing, maybe out of pity. I worked like a madman, darting between the production line and the break room to check on her, feeding her milk when she fussed. But I couldn't hide her forever. Emily started crying, her wails cutting through the noise of the machines. The foreman, a burly man named Tom with a perpetually sour face, called me into his office. "James, are you out of your mind?" he bellowed, pointing at Emily, crying in my arms. "This is a factory, not a daycare. I've already warned you about your slipping performance." I bowed my head, my voice shaking. "I'm sorry, boss, but I have no one to watch her. My wife left. My family won't help. Just this once. I promise I'll—" But Tom shook his head, his face red. "No, just this once. You're fired. Grab your stuff and get out." I stood there frozen, as if the world had collapsed. The job, the only thing keeping me afloat, was gone. I left the factory with Emily in my arms, tears streaming down my face, mixing with sweat. "I'm sorry, kid," I whispered, but she just looked at me with innocent eyes, unaware of it all. Losing my job was a death blow. I wandered the town, applying everywhere. Grocery stores, auto shops, even fast food joints. But my resume wasn't impressive. Just a 35-year-old factory worker with no degree, now burdened with a young child. "We need full-time workers with no distractions," one manager said, glancing at Emily in my arms. "Sorry, but no." I tried place after place, but the answer was always the same. Rejection. Each door that shut made me feel smaller, more useless. The meager unemployment benefits barely lasted a few weeks, but the bills kept coming. I used up my savings to pay rent, but eventually I couldn't keep up. One rainy afternoon, George, the landlord, knocked on my door. "James, you're 3 months behind," he said coldly, without a shred of sympathy. "Move out. I need to rent to someone else." I begged. "Mr. George, please give me more time. I'm looking for work. I'll pay." But he shook his head and walked away. The next day, our belongings were tossed onto the sidewalk. I stood in the rain, holding Emily under my worn-out jacket, watching the apartment, the last place we called home, locked shut. There was nowhere left to go. I called my parents one last time, my voice breaking with desperation. "Dad, please. I just need a place to stay. Emily's soaked. I don't know what to do." But my father's voice was dry over the phone. "James, we can't. Michael and Jessica are coming with the twins. We have to take care of them. Figure it out, son." The call ended, and my world went dark. They refused because of Michael. Always Michael. I held Emily, wandering in the rain, my heart shattered. We were officially homeless. That first night, we took shelter under a highway bridge where other drifters gathered. Rain pattered overhead, and the wind cut through like ice. I wrapped Emily in an old blanket, holding her close to keep her warm. She cried from hunger, from cold, and all I could do was whisper, "Daddy's here, kid." The next morning, I went to the local church where they handed out free food. A kind old woman gave me a box of milk and bread, her eyes full of pity. "Take this, son. God will watch over you and your girl." I took it, tears streaming down, feeling a flicker of warmth from a stranger for the first time. Under the bridge, we survived day to day. I learned to get food from soup kitchens where other homeless people shared their stories. Lost jobs, lost homes, lost everything, just like me. They didn't judge, didn't play favorites. An old man named Sam, a former mechanic, gave me an old tent and taught me how to start a fire for warmth. "Down here, everyone's struggling, but we help each other," he said, clapping my shoulder. A woman named Anna, also raising a young child, gave Emily some hand-me-down clothes and watched her when I went job hunting. People at the bottom of society, showed me more humanity than my own family. Unlike my parents, they shared without expecting anything, listened without comparing. Under the bridge in those freezing nights, I learned that true kindness comes from the most unexpected places. Emily, though young, seemed to feel it, too. She smiled more when playing with the other kids under the bridge. But this life wasn't easy. Every night, I lay awake worrying about the future. Emily started getting sick from the cold, and I had to beg at a free clinic for a doctor to see her. "She'll be okay, but she needs a warmer place," they said. I nodded, but I knew we had nowhere to go. I kept looking for work, but with my ragged clothes and the smell of campfire smoke clinging to me. No one would hire me. I struggled, went hungry, but for Emily, I didn't give up. She was my only light, the reason I kept breathing, kept fighting. Then one evening, a storm rolled in. Rain poured down in sheets, and fierce winds shook the tent. Water seeped through the ground, soaking the blankets. I huddled with Emily in a corner, using my jacket to shield her. But droplets still fell on us. She wailed, her cries blending with the booming thunder. "Shh, it's okay. Daddy's here," I soothed, my heart pounding with worry. Sam and Anna had gone to find shelter elsewhere, leaving us alone under the dark bridge. I thought it was the worst night of my life. Cold, hungry, and hopeless. I prayed silently, though I barely believed in God anymore. Please give us a way out. Suddenly, through the torrential rain, I saw a shadowy figure approaching. An old man, tall but slightly stooped, dressed in an expensive black suit, holding an umbrella against the storm. He stopped in front of our tent, his eyes cutting through the darkness, settling on me and Emily. I held her tighter, my protective instincts flaring. Under this bridge, a stranger could be anyone, a crook, a cop, or just another drifter. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice from the cold, struggling to sit up to shield her. The old man didn't answer right away. He folded his umbrella and crouched down to see us better, his wrinkled face lit by sharp eyes as if studying something precious that had been lost. "I'm Edward," he said, his voice warm and steady, a stark contrast to the storm raging outside. "I'm your grandfather, James." I froze. The word grandfather echoed in my head like thunder. My whole life, my father, Robert, had told me my grandfather died when I was young. A car accident, he'd said, and we never spoke of it again. No photos, no mementos, just a void in our family's story. What did you say?" I stammered, my voice trembling. "My grandfather's dead. My dad said so. Who are you really? How do you know my name?" Edward gave a sad smile, his eyes glistening under the faint glow of a streetlight reflecting off the bridge. "I didn't die. James, your father, Robert, lied. He took all my money, abandoned me and your grandmother, then spread that story to cover it up. I've been looking for you for a long time through a private investigator. I know everything about Sarah, the divorce, what you're going through." He paused, looking at Emily, sobbing in my arms. "And this little girl, my great-granddaughter. Don't let her stay in this cold. Come with me. I want to take care of you both to make up for what you've lost." I stared at the old man, my mind reeling. Doubt surged. Was this a cruel trick? A con man preying on desperate people like me? But as I looked closer, I saw an eerie resemblance. Sharp blue eyes like my father's. A crooked smile I vaguely recalled from hazy dreams of my past. And his voice, warm, sincere, not like a liar's. The rain kept falling, the wind howled, and Emily cried louder from the cold. I had nothing left to lose. No home, no job, no family. If he was a bad person, could things possibly get worse than this? But if he was telling the truth, maybe this was the way out. The glimmer of hope for Emily. I looked at my daughter, her cheeks flushed from crying, and my heart twisted. "All right," I said. My voice choked. "I'll go with you. But if you're lying, I won't forgive you. For my daughter's sake. Edward nodded, standing and holding his umbrella over us. You won't regret this. James, come on. My car is nearby. I picked up Emily and followed him through the rain, my steps heavy with exhaustion and doubt. But deep inside, a faint spark of hope flickered. Maybe, just maybe, fate was finally smiling on us. We stepped out from under the bridge, the rain still pattering on Edward's umbrella. His car, a sleek black limousine with a uniformed driver waiting, stood not far off, its headlights cutting through the rain like a beacon. I hesitated for a second, glancing back at the soggy tent now torn apart by the wind, then climbed into the car. Inside, it was warm, the leather seat soft, and a child's car seat was already installed. Edward sat across from me, giving a faint smile when he saw my surprise. I came prepared, he said, his voice warm. She needs to be safe. I held Emily closer. She'd stopped crying, perhaps soothed by the sudden warmth, and I stared out the window as the car pulled away. We left Michigan, heading for California, a long journey, but Edward had arranged a private plane from a nearby airport. I didn't ask much. My exhausted mind focused only on keeping Emily warm. During the flight, I drifted into sleep. The first time in months. I wasn't jolted awake by cold winds or passing traffic. When we landed in Los Angeles, the sky was bright. Another car waited, taking us to the city's outskirts. The scenery changed as we drove from bustling streets to tree-lined roads, then to a gated community with high fences and an imposing iron gate. The car stopped in front of a sprawling mansion like something out of a magazine. A two-story cream-colored building with red-tiled roofs surrounded by lush green gardens and a shimmering pool under the California sun. I stood there holding Emily, my jaw dropping in awe. This is your house, I stammered. Edward smiled, placing a hand on my shoulder. Our house. James, come inside. You and your daughter need rest. Stepping into the mansion felt like entering another world. The grand foyer had marble floors, a sparkling crystal chandelier, and the faint scent of fresh flowers from a large vase. A middle-aged woman in a maid's uniform greeted us with a smile. Welcome, sir, and welcome. James and little Emily, she said as if she'd known us forever. Edward introduced her. This is Maria, the housekeeper. Over there is Carlos, the chef, and security at the gate. They'll take care of everything. I nodded, still dazed. Edward led us upstairs to a spacious guest room with a king-size bed, a private bathroom, and a corner filled with brand-new toys for kids. "Sir, this is for you and Emily," he said. I had it ready. Later, Edward called a private doctor. A middle-aged man named Dr. Hernandez arrived within half an hour carrying a full medical kit. He examined Emily first, checking her temperature, listening to her lungs, and prescribing medicine for her cough. She has a mild cold, but she'll be fine with proper care, he said, then turned to me. I sat there as he checked me. High blood pressure from stress, malnourishment, and minor cuts from street life. You need rest and proper meals, he advised. Edward nodded and instructed the chef to prepare dinner. For the first time in months, I ate a real meal: hot chicken soup, fresh salad, and toasted bread. Emily got special formula milk, which she drank eagerly, her eyes brightening. That night, I lay on the soft bed, listening to Emily's steady breathing in her crib beside me, and slept deeply. No nightmares, no worries. For the first time in years, the first days in the mansion passed like a dream. The house wasn't just grand, It was equipped with every comfort: a fruit orchard in the backyard where I could stroll with Emily, a gym, and a library full of books, 24/7 security, daily cleaning by the staff, and 3 nutritious meals from the chef. Edward hired a nanny named Olivia, a gentle young woman who'd worked at a high-end daycare, to look after Emily when I needed a break. "You need time to recover," Edward said. "Let Olivia handle her." I hesitated at first, but Olivia quickly proved trustworthy. She sang lullabies to Emily, played with her, and even taught me how to massage her to ease her cough. Emily visibly improved. Her cheeks grew rosy. She smiled more, and she started toddling around the room. As for me, I took hot showers daily, ate proper meals, and felt my body coming back to life. Doubts lingered, but each day they faded under Edward's genuine care. We began settling into life here. Mornings I woke to the smell of coffee from the kitchen, eating breakfast with Edward as he talked about California, the sea, and the warm sun. In the afternoons, I took Emily to the garden, watching her giggle as she touched the leaves. At night, Olivia watched her while I relaxed, reading or just gazing at the stars. Edward didn't push, only gently asking about my life, about Sarah, about the hardships. "There's no rush," he said. "You need time." I started opening up, telling him about the auto factory, the betrayal, my parents, and Michael. Edward listened, his eyes heavy with sadness as if sharing my pain. Then one evening, with Emily asleep under Olivia's care, Edward invited me to the balcony, a spot overlooking the pool, shimmering under the lights. He poured 2 glasses of wine, sat in a leather chair, and said, "James, it's time I told you the truth about the past, about why I found you." My heart raced. The air felt heavy, the faint sea breeze carrying a hint of salt. Edward stared into the distance, his voice low as if recounting a painful story. "Years ago, when I was younger, I had a happy family, your grandmother, my wife, and our son, Robert. Your father. I worked hard, saved money and bonds for our future. But Robert, he changed. He got hooked on gambling, racked up debts. One night, he took everything from the safe: cash, bonds, even sold some family heirlooms, and vanished without a word. Your grandmother was devastated. She had a heart attack that night, and she was gone forever." Edward's voice broke. He took a sip of wine, his eyes red. I sat there stunned, picturing it. My grandmother, whom I'd never known, dying from her own son's betrayal. I was nearly 50, penniless, heartbroken. I thought my life was over, but I didn't give up. I started over, a small job in real estate, borrowing from friends, working day and night. Over decades, I built Pacific Shores Properties, a coastal real estate company, from a tiny office in Los Angeles. I now have branches across California and beyond. I'm wealthy, but my heart was always empty. Losing my wife, my son, and not knowing what became of my grandson. He paused, looking at me. "Recently, I hired investigators. They found Robert, then you, James Carter, a factory worker in Michigan, divorced, kicked out by your parents, homeless under a bridge. I couldn't sit by. I had to find you to make up for what you've suffered because of Robert's mistakes." I sat there reeling as if struck by lightning. The truth lay bare. My father, Robert, wasn't a victim of fate, but a thief, a betrayer who caused my grandmother's death. My grandfather, whom I thought was dead, sat here, wealthy and full of regret. I was grateful he'd saved us from hell, but also anguished by my parents' lies. "Why did my dad do it?" I asked. My voice choked. Edward shook his head. "He was weak, James. But you're different. You're strong like I was." We sat in silence for a long time, the sea breeze whispering like a comfort. I looked at the pool, my heart a storm of emotions, but also relieved. At last, I had a real family, a real home for Emily. The days that followed were spent processing that truth. During the day, I took Emily to the garden, watching her crawl clumsily on the lush green lawn, giggling as she touched vibrant flowers. Olivia, the nanny, was always there, helping me care for her without making me feel inadequate. But at night, when the mansion fell silent, memories crashed over me like waves. I thought about my parents, about growing up in that old house in Michigan, where Dad always spoke of my late grandfather with feigned regret. Now I understood why he rarely talked about the past, why Mom dodged my questions about Grandma. They'd built a lie to hide their guilt, and I, their eldest son, had lived in its shadow without knowing. I was angry but also sad. Sad for my grandmother, for Edward, and for myself. I called my parents once, but they didn't pick up. Maybe they thought I was calling to bother them or beg. I didn't call again. I had Edward now, and Emily. That was enough. Edward didn't push me to do anything right away. He gave me time to heal, but he also subtly hinted at the future. One morning as we ate breakfast on the patio, toast, fresh fruit, and steaming coffee, he looked at me and said, "James, have you rested enough? Pacific Shores Properties could use someone like you. Start small, a sales position, no special treatment, just a chance to learn." I was taken aback, staring at him. "Grandpa, I'm just a factory worker. I don't know anything about real estate." Edward smiled, patting my shoulder. "You know about life, James. That's something no school can teach. Give it a try. For Emily, she needs a steady father." I hesitated, but agreed. I didn't want to live off his generosity forever. On my first day at the company, I wore a suit Edward bought me, feeling like I was in someone else's clothes. Pacific Shores Properties was in downtown Los Angeles, a modern glass building with a gleaming logo under the sun. The office buzzed with activity, employees on phones and computers. Edward introduced me to the team, but didn't highlight our connection, only saying I was a new hire. "Learn, James," he whispered, before leaving me to fend for myself. My role was modest, sitting at a small desk, calling potential clients, pitching coastal properties. A coworker, a guy named Ryan, guided me. "Just be genuine. Don't push clients like that." The first weeks were tough. I was used to manual labor at the factory, the roar of machines and sweating through my shirt. Now I had to learn to persuade, read contracts, and handle numbers. Some calls ended abruptly, with clients snapping. "Not interested. Goodbye." I came home exhausted, but didn't quit. I remembered the days under the bridge, Emily crying from cold. That was my drive. I studied hard, reading real estate books Edward left in the home library, asking Ryan about sales techniques, and observing meetings. My honesty became an asset. Clients sensed sincerity when I explained the practical benefits of a beachfront home. No exaggeration. Slowly, I proved myself. A month later, I closed my first deal. A middle-aged couple bought a small condo in Santa Monica. They said, "You explain things clearly, not like other salespeople." Ryan slapped my shoulder. "Nice work, James. You've got a knack for this." I smiled, but inside I was grateful for my past struggles. Sarah's betrayal taught me patience. My parents' favoritism made me humble. Homelessness forged my resolve. I wasn't the timid factory worker anymore. I cared about my coworkers, listened to their issues, and acted quickly. In a team project, when arguments broke out over client approaches, I suggested a middle ground. Think of clients like family. They need homes, not empty promises. The team agreed, and the project succeeded. The senior manager, Susan, a sharp woman in her 50s, praised me in a meeting. "James, you've got leadership potential. Keep that integrity, and you'll go far." Time passed, and I climbed the ranks, feeling the change in myself. From a broken man, I became decisive, empathetic. The company grew with my ideas like a program to help financially struggling clients inspired by my own life. Susan and other managers praised me. "James, you don't just sell, you change lives." Edward smiled whenever he heard reports, and I knew he was preparing me for something bigger. 4 years passed. It sounds long, but to me it was a whirlwind. I rose through the ranks, not because of family ties, but through merit. Then came the turning point. Not dramatic like a movie, but real and earned. In a boardroom meeting, Edward stood, his voice resonating in the glass-walled room. "I've watched James for 4 years. No privileges, no favoritism. He started at the bottom and rose through ability, increasing revenue by 200%, expanding 4 branches, and building a company culture based on trust." The managers clapped. Susan smiled. "James deserves this." Edward looked at me. "As of today, you're CEO of Pacific Shores Properties." I stood there stunned, my heart pounding. This wasn't a dream. It was real. I hugged Edward, whispering, "Thank you, Grandpa." He patted my shoulder. "You did this, James." Being CEO wasn't easy. I sat in a large office with a vast ocean view, but the responsibilities were immense. Strategic decisions, investor meetings, crisis management. The company thrived. Record revenue expansion into Nevada. Partners respected my reliability. Once during a market downturn, I rejected a high-profit but risky deal. "We don't gamble with clients' futures," I said. They respected that, and more contracts followed. I stayed humble, eating lunch with employees, listening to ideas from the ground up. I was once like you. I told the staff at a company meeting, "Let's build together." Emily became my greatest joy. Now 6, she's bright, lively, and always asking about my work. "What do you do at the company, Daddy?" she asked, sitting on my lap at the dinner table. "I help people get nice homes like ours," I replied, kissing her forehead. She attends a private school, plays piano, and swims, things I never dreamed of as a kid. She's my drive. Every company decision I think of her, of building a legacy. The media took notice. A local business magazine ran a feature, From Homeless Factory Worker to CEO, James Carter's inspiring story. They interviewed me in my office, and I spoke honestly about Sarah, my parents, the bridge, and Edward. Life taught me failure isn't the end. I said. The article went viral, and a local morning show invited me. Sitting on their sofa, I shared my story with a genuine smile. From homeless to CEO, how'd you do it? The host asked. I looked at the camera. Thanks to my grandfather and never giving up, everyone has a chance if they keep going. The interview boosted the company's fame. Clients poured in, and I received letters from people who'd struggled like me, thanking me for hope. But the past wouldn't let me rest. One afternoon, as I sat in my office reviewing revenue reports from the new San Diego branch, my phone rang. It was the receptionist, her voice uneasy. James, there are 2 people in the lobby claiming to be your parents. They insist on seeing you now. I froze, gripping the phone tightly. My parents, Robert and Patricia, after all these years, after they threw Emily and me out like beggars. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Let them wait in the lobby. I'm coming down. I stood gazing out the window at the sparkling Pacific Ocean under the sun and told myself, I'm not that weak, James, anymore. I walked down to the lobby where the crystal chandelier's light gleamed off the polished marble floor. There they stood, my father in a tight, outdated suit, my mother in a worn wool coat, her eyes darting around as if appraising the building's worth. It was the first time I'd seen them since they kicked us out of their Michigan home years ago. My father looked at me, forcing an awkward smile. James, my boy, we saw you on TV. You've made it. We're so proud, my mother chimed in, her voice syrupy. Yes, James, we should reconnect family. Right. We could help you manage all this. She waved her hand around the lobby, as if staking a claim. I stood there staring at them coldly, my heart no longer aching, just calm. Help like how you helped me and Emily when you threw us out on the street, when I begged and you refused. All for Michael and his kids. My father's face paled, and he stammered. James, those were tough times. You're rich now. We can let it go. We're your family. I shook my head, my voice steady. Family, you abandoned me when I needed you most. And now you come for a share. No way. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from the elevator. Edward appeared, tall in a sharp gray suit, his eyes cold as steel. He stopped beside me, staring straight at my parents, or rather at his son, Robert. My father froze, his face ashen as if he'd seen a ghost. Edward, Dad, you're alive, he stammered, stepping back. My mother clutched his arm, her eyes wide with horror. It's impossible, Robert said. You died years ago. Edward gave a chilling smile. Yes, Robert said that to cover his crimes. But I'm alive and I'm the chairman of Pacific Shores Properties, the company you're standing in. The lobby grew tense as a few employees and clients paused to watch, the air crackling with anticipation. Edward didn't hesitate, his voice ringing clear, laying the truth bare for all to hear. Robert, you stole everything, my money, our savings, and abandoned your mother and me. Your mother, James's grandmother, died of a heart attack from the shock. You left me penniless at 50, then spread lies that I was dead to live guilt-free. And then you abandoned your own son and granddaughter, James and Emily, when they needed you most, kicking them out for Michael's sake. My father shook his head, his face flushed, trying to defend himself. It wasn't like that. I just borrowed it. Then things spiraled. You understand. But Edward pulled a stack of papers from his pocket. Investigator reports, old receipts, even photos of the empty safe from years ago. Here's the proof. Robert, you can't deny it. And Patricia, you knew everything but covered for him. My mother faltered, stammering. We didn't mean it. James, say something. But I just stood there looking at them. Two people who were once my parents, now just a painful memory. They couldn't argue. The evidence was undeniable. The lobby was silent, a few employees whispering, and my parents lowered their heads, leaving in shame without another word. I watched them go, feeling no anger, just release. Sometime later, Edward called me into his office. "James, it's time to settle things," he said, his voice calm but resolute. He had invited my father, Robert, and Michael to a company meeting under the pretense of business discussions. I knew it wasn't an ordinary meeting, but I didn't object. The day arrived, and Pacific Shores Properties' grand conference hall was packed with employees and senior managers. My father and Michael walked in, Michael in a flashy suit, exuding confidence as if he were there to claim a share, while my father kept his head down, avoiding eye contact. They sat in the front row, Michael whispering to Dad, "Guess James is ready to share the success." Edward took the stage, his voice booming through the microphone. "Today I'm announcing my official will. I'm 75 years old and Pacific Shores Properties needs a worthy successor." The room fell silent, all eyes on him. He looked at me and smiled. "James Carter will inherit the majority of my estate and full control of the company. Not because of blood, but because he's proven his character and ability. From a sales associate to CEO, building this company stronger with integrity and hard work." The hall erupted in applause. Susan and my colleagues cheered. I stood hugging Edward. My voice choked. "Thank you, Grandpa." My father and Michael were cut out entirely. Not a cent. Not a share. Michael's face paled, and he shot to his feet. "How can this be? I'm your grandson, too." My father, trembling, pleaded in front of everyone. "Edward, Dad, please forgive me. James, talk to him. We're family." The room went quiet. All eyes on the scene. I stepped onto the stage, looking straight into my father's eyes. The man who once threw me and Emily out. My voice was cold but steady. "The day you kicked me and Emily out, I lost my father. The only person I respect now is my grandfather." My father sank into his chair, his face ashen. Michael, flushed with embarrassment, pulled him up, and they left in silence under the whispering gazes of the staff, departing in shame with no further excuses. I watched them go, my heart at peace. The past was finally closed. After that meeting, everything became clearer than ever. I returned to the mansion, holding Emily close, her warmth a reminder that life still held beauty. Edward patted my shoulder, his voice warm. "You've done well, James. Now it's time to live for the future." We ate dinner together, a true family meal with Emily's laughter echoing through the spacious room. She was growing up, her eyes bright and her smile radiant. No trace of those cold days under the bridge. I told her about her great-grandfather, about lessons from the past, and she listened, even if she didn't fully understand. One evening, when things had settled, I took Emily to the company building's balcony, the highest point in Los Angeles, with a sweeping view of the city's twinkling lights under the night sky. The cool sea breeze carried the scent of salt and freedom. I held her in my arms, pointing out the towering buildings and bustling streets below. "Look, kid, that's our world," I whispered. Emily giggled, waving as if greeting the lights. In that moment, I realized I'd come full circle, from the depths of despair, clutching my daughter under the rain to this pinnacle of honor. Standing tall as a man, I reflected on what I'd endured: Sarah's betrayal, my parents, and Michael's coldness, the homeless nights under the bridge, and Edward's redemption. They were no longer wounds. They were lessons, the foundation of what I'd achieved: a thriving company, a loving home, and a heart capable of love. I'm both a successful CEO leading Pacific Shores properties to record revenues and relentless expansion, and a devoted father, spending every weekend with Emily, taking her to the beach, teaching her to swim, and telling her stories of the kind people under the bridge. She's growing up in a new family filled with love: Edward as a gentle great-grandfather, Olivia as a caring aunt figure, and me, her dad, always there to protect her. We're no longer alone. The mansion is now alive with laughter, shared meals, and new memories. But deep down, I've learned a profound truth. Blood doesn't always make a family. My biological parents, despite sharing my blood, abandoned me when I needed them most. Yet, Edward, betrayed by his own son, came back to make amends. It's love, responsibility, and integrity that create a true legacy, the one I'll pass on to Emily so she grows up valuing those who truly stand by her. And if there's any advice from this journey, it's this: keep pushing forward no matter how tough the odds. I once thought my life was over under that bridge, but I didn't give up. I took one step at a time. The future will always be bright if you keep moving forward, never quitting. Life may push you to the bottom, but you decide whether to stand up. For me, Emily was my reason to rise. And now I stand here at the top, ready for whatever comes next.